Welcome to the Wilderness Protocol. I'm Elias Thorne, your host, and this is where we explore the deep, the dark, and the unexplained. We chase whispers on the wind and stories clinging to old maps. We're here to question, explore, and sometimes debunk. For weeks, we've pursued a persistent piece of folklore from the American Southwest, the legend of the silent gods. These entities are said to be ancient, predating the first people here. They are not gods of creation or destruction, harvest or hunt, but of silence and stillness. They inhabit remote desert corners, their presence marked by a profound, unnerving quiet. Stories claim entering their domain means having your voice stolen, your thoughts scattered, and your essence absorbed into the vast silence. At the Wilderness Protocol, we approach these tales with healthy skepticism. Legends, however compelling, often arise from the human need to explain the inexplicable. A sudden rockslide, a disorienting echo, the natural quiet of a desolate canyon, these can be seeds for myths. I've long suspected the silent gods are no different. That's why I'm deep in the canyons of the unforgiving, a place whose name dares you to enter. For 3 days, my recording equipment has been my only companion, documenting natural sounds, the wind, a lone hawk's cry. I came to prove the silence is just an absence of noise, not a presence of power. To strip away the legend and reveal simple scientific truth. But something has happened that I, for all my practiced skepticism, cannot explain. Something that has shaken this investigation's foundation. I'm recording this on my personal field recorder, away from my main camp. My voice is quieter than usual, not by choice. The air feels heavy and thick, pressing in, making it a struggle to push words out. This morning, I returned to a rock face I've documented since my Aravala large, weathered sandstone slab, notable for its complete lack of markings. I photographed it yesterday. I have time-stamped images. It was blank. Today there's a petroglyph. It wasn't there yesterday. I am certain. It's not old. The edges are sharp. The exposed rock a fresh red against the weathered surface. It looks recently carved, but I am the only person for at least 50 miles. My satellite phone shows no other signals. My trail cameras have picked up nothing but a curious coyote. The petroglyph is unlike any I've seen. It's not in the style of the ancestral Puebloans, Fremont people, or other known cultures of this region. It's a complex, interwoven spiral, and at its center is a shape disturbingly like an open mouth. The silence is different now. It's no longer just an absence of sound. Feels active, attentive. Feels like it's listening. I came here to debunk a legend. But now, as I sit here, my own voice a faint tremor in the oppressive quiet, staring at a carving that shouldn't exist, I must consider a terrifying possibility. The legend is real, and I have somehow just gotten its attention. Stay with me. Let's see what the protocol is when the wilderness starts talking back. Let's rewind. 48 hours ago, my perspective was clearer, more certain. I arrived in the canyons of the unforgiving with a clear objective, to systematically dismantle the myth of the silent gods. My plan was simple. Spend a week documenting the environment, recording audio, and demonstrating that the unnatural silence was merely a combination of geographic isolation and psychological suggestion. The first 2 days were a skeptic's paradise. The landscape was a breathtaking, brutalist masterpiece of sun-scorched rock and endless sky. The silence was profound but not menacing. It was the kind of quiet that allows you to hear your own heartbeat. I noted in my log it was a pure silence, an empty canvas. My base camp was in a sheltered alcove, a natural rock amphitheater protecting me from the wind. I had my tent, solar panels, main recording rig with sensitive parabolic microphones, and smaller wireless recorders placed at strategic locations throughout the canyon system to create a complete acoustic map. On that first day, I hiked for hours, placing recorders, speaking into my personal mic often, my voice sounding robust, almost intrusive in the stillness. Elias Thorne, The Wilderness Protocol, Day 1, 14:30 hours. I'm about 3 miles east of base camp, placing the last of the remote audio sensors. The silence out here is it's exactly what you'd expect from a place this remote. It's beautiful. You can hear the wind whistling through that arch over there, a lizard skittering on a rock 50 yards away. There's nothing unnatural about it. The legend says your voice weakens, but I feel like I could shout and the echo would carry for miles. I tested it. Hello, the echo repeated, fading. Yup, echoes work just fine. So much for the voice-stealing silence. I was confident, even cocky. The legend felt flimsy, a ghost story. The silent gods were just a personification of solitude. I spent the evening collating audio data, which showed what I expected. Low-frequency rumbles of distant tectonic activity, high-frequency bat calls, the sigh of the wind. A perfectly normal, if exceptionally quiet, desert soundscape. Day 2 was similar. I focused on a location local folklore pointed to as a place of significant power. A sheer, flat rock wall facing west, called the Listening Stone. Locals said the gods sometimes left messages there for those who knew how to look. Of course, no one had actually seen a message. It was always a story about a grandfather or great-uncle. Classic folklore. I arrived at the Listening Stone around midday. It was an impressive, monolithic slab of red sandstone, its surface scoured smooth. I spent hours there, taking photographs, running my hands over the utterly blank rock. I made another log entry. Elias Thorne, The Wilderness Protocol, Day 2, 1300 hours. I'm at the so-called Listening Stone, and it is a rock. A very large, very flat rock, but a rock nonetheless. No petroglyphs, pictographs, or ancient carvings. Nothing. I've cross-referenced it with every archaeological database I have access to. It's not a known site of historical significance, which makes sense. The legend is falling apart. The silence here is the same as everywhere else. My voice is fine. My equipment is functioning perfectly. Tomorrow, I plan to start packing up some remote sensors. I think I've gathered enough data to conclusively state that the silent gods are a myth. That evening, a strange, dry storm rolled in. The wind howled, kicking up a thick, red dust that blotted out the stars. It was claustrophobic. I sealed myself in my tent, the fabric snapping in the gale. The wind created a roaring white noise, the opposite of silence. I thought, so much for the gods of stillness, and fell asleep, secure in my conclusions, my work almost done. I had no idea that while I slept, wrapped in smug certainty, something was being written on the Listening Stone, waiting for morning, waiting for me. The storm passed before dawn. On day 3, the world felt scrubbed clean. The air was crisp, the dust had settled, and a profound silence had returned. But it was different. It wasn't the peaceful, empty silence of the first 2 days. This silence had weight. It felt thick, viscous, as if the air had become denser. I attributed it to the change in atmospheric pressure, an easy scientific explanation. I made coffee, my movements sluggish, feeling observed. I shook off the feeling as paranoia from isolation and poor sleep. My plan was to retrieve the recorder near the Listening Stone. The 2-mile hike, easy the day before, felt different. The familiar landscape seemed subtly altered. The shadows deeper, the colors more saturated. And the silence pressed in, growing more intense with every step. I tried talking to myself, a habit on solo expeditions. Elias Thorn log entry. Day 3. The air feels strange, heavy. On my way to the listening stone. The silence is really something. Almost buzzing. A low hum that's more a feeling than a sound. It's making it hard to think straight. My voice, does it sound odd? It feels like I have to push the words out, like speaking through water. As I neared the stone, the feeling intensified to a physical pressure against my eardrums, my skull. My heart beat faster. A primal sense of wrongness crept up my spine. This wasn't just quiet. It was an active, encroaching presence. I rounded the final bend, and the listening stone came into view. I stopped dead. My mind couldn't process it. The rock face, immaculately blank for 2 days, was now decorated. There, in the center, was a petroglyph. It was impossible. I cycled through rational explanations. A prank? Who would follow me into this inhospitable region to carve a rock? How could they have done it in a single night during a dust storm without leaving a track? I scanned the ground. My own faint footprints from yesterday were there. No others. I approached the stone cautiously, as if it were a sleeping predator. The carving was fresh. I saw the sharp edges where the weathered desert varnish had been chipped away, revealing the lighter sandstone beneath. Red dust still settled in the deeper grooves, undisturbed by the morning breeze. This was made very recently. The design was mesmerizing and horrifying. A chaotic, labyrinthine spiral with jagged, angular lines folding back on themselves impossibly. It looked less like a symbol and more like a diagram of something unnatural. At the center, where a spiral should terminate, was a distinct shape. An oval with a line through the middle. An open mouth. Vertigo washed over me. The buzzing silence intensified, coalescing around the carving, as if the petroglyph itself were the source. My hands shook as I raised my camera, blurring the first few pictures. I forced myself to steady my grip, to breathe, to document this evidence. Evidence of what? I didn't know. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the carving. The rock was cold, but a faint vibration came from it. A low thrum that traveled up my arm and into my chest, matching the buzzing in my head. I snatched my hand back as if burned. This is when real fear set in, a deep existential dread. My rational, scientific worldview shattered. I was confronted with a physical impossibility. I scrambled for my backpack, pulling out my satellite phone to contact someone, anyone. But then I noticed something else. The remote audio recorder I'd left at the base of the stone, the one I came to retrieve, was different. The green recording LED was dark. It had a fresh battery. I picked it up. It was strangely warm. I pressed play, hoping to hear the storm, the wind, maybe the sound of whatever or whoever made the carving. I put the earpiece in. What I heard was not the wind or the storm. It was silence. Perfect, absolute digital void. I cranked the volume to maximum. Nothing. The recording was a flat line. The device had been active, the timecode running, but for 8 hours, from the storm's start to my arrival, it had not recorded a single decibel. It was as if the silence itself had overwhelmed the microphone, smothering the electronics. My blood ran cold. The wind had howled all night. My tent, 2 miles away, had roared with the sound. But here, at the listening stone, there had been nothing. An island of absolute quiet in a sea of noise. The kind of quiet that could allow someone or something to work undisturbed. Then, as I stood reeling, I heard a sound. A soft, scraping noise from behind me. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. Just the empty canyon. The sound came again. Faint, rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape. I looked back at the listening stone. My breath caught. A new line was appearing on the rock. It was being carved right now before my eyes. No chisel, no tool, no hand. The rock was simply flaking away, peeling back, red dust falling from a line that slowly extended itself from the outer edge of the spiral. An invisible finger drawing in the stone. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The new line moved towards the open mouth at the center. I didn't scream, couldn't. My voice was gone, trapped by sheer terror. I did the only thing I could. I ran. I fled, stumbling over rocks, lungs burning, mind a vortex of denial and fear. I didn't look back. I just ran, leaving my camera, recorder, and carefully constructed skepticism in the dust at the foot of the impossibly carving stone. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed to warp in the oppressive silence. Canyon walls twisted into leering faces. Every shadow seemed to hold a presence. The only sound was my frantic heartbeat and ragged gasps. But even those felt muted, stifled, as if the silence were a thick blanket smothering them. I finally collapsed about a mile from the stone, my body refusing to go further. I lay on the hot sand, gasping for air that felt too thick to breathe. My eyes squeezed shut against the terrifying image of the self-carving petroglyph. It's not real, I told myself. A hallucination, stress, dehydration, isolation. I clung to these rationalizations, but deep down, I knew what I had seen was real. After what felt like hours, I got to my feet, legs trembling. My one goal, get back to camp, get my gear, get out. The investigation was over. The Wilderness Protocol had encountered something it was not equipped to handle. The journey back was a nightmare of slow, deliberate effort. Every step a struggle. The silence was no longer passive. It was an active antagonist, clinging to me, heavy and suffocating, like walking through deep water. The pressure in my head was an immense, crushing weight. When I finally stumbled into my camp's alcove, a new horror awaited. Everything was covered in a fine layer of red dust from the storm, as expected. My tent, solar panels, main equipment case. But that wasn't what was wrong. It was the absolute, total quiet. My main recording rig, with its powerful amplifiers and sensitive microphones, was always on. Even in the quietest moments, it picked up something. The hum of its own electronics. A whisper of wind. The audio meters should have been faintly flickering. They were dead, flatlined, just like the small recorder at the stone. My wireless audio sensors, placed throughout the canyons, were scattered around my tent like dead insects. They had not been there when I left. I had placed them miles apart. Yet here they were, all of them collected in one place. Their recording lights were dark. I picked one up. It was warm. The battery was completely drained, as were all the others. Something had gathered them, brought them here, and drained them of their power. A clear, unmistakable message. Stop listening. Sharp panic pierced my terror. This was a violation, an incursion into my only safe space. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was a target. I fumbled with my main equipment case's clasps, my fingers clumsy. I had to see the recordings from the main rig during the night. Had it recorded the howling wind? Or had it, like the recorder at the stone, been enveloped in that impossible pocket of silence? I powered on the monitor, hands shaking. The system booted tortuously slowly. I navigated to the audio files from the previous night. 12 hours of recordings, from sunset to sunrise. I selected the first file and hit play. The sound of roaring wind filled my headphones. A deafening, chaotic gale. For the first few hours, it was exactly what I expected. I scrubbed forward. Wind, wind, more wind. I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe the equipment at the stone had just malfunctioned. Then, at 2:17 a.m., the sound cut out. Instantly. Not a fade, not a decline. As if someone had flicked a switch. One moment, a hurricane of sound. The next, a perfect digital abyss. A flat line, an absolute zero. My blood turned to ice. It had happened here, too. The silence had rolled in, a tidal wave of nothingness, and swallowed my camp. It lasted for exactly 4 hours. At 6:17 a.m., just as abruptly, the sound of the wind returned, gentler now, as the storm subsided. For hours, an island of impossible silence in the middle of a storm. The exact time the petroglyph must have been carved. I tore the headphones off, heart hammering. I was trapped. Whatever this thing was, it controlled the very fabric of the environment. Could erase sound, move objects, carve stone with its will. I had to leave. Now, I started throwing things into my pack: food, water, my satellite phone, a first aid kit. The rest could stay. It didn't matter. As I worked frantically, I noticed the silence intensifying again. The pressure in my head was building. It became difficult to breathe, to move my limbs. The air was turning to invisible concrete around me. And then, a new sound, or rather, a new lack of sound. The faint, almost imperceptible hum of my own body. The sound of my own life, the low thrum of my blood. The rush of air in my lungs was fading. I clutched my chest. A new, more intimate terror seizing me. The silence wasn't just outside me anymore. It was inside, invading me, erasing me from the inside out. My own internal monologue, the constant chatter of my thoughts, became disjointed, breaking apart into isolated words. Run, pack, phone, God. I grabbed my pack and stumbled out of the alcove, forcing my legs to move. Each step was a monumental effort of will. The world blurred at the edges, colors desaturating to gray. I glanced at my hands. They seemed distant, unfamiliar. The silence was stealing my senses, my thoughts, stealing me. As I staggered away from the camp, from the dead electronics and the encroaching gray, I cast one last, terrified look back at the entrance to the alcove. Standing there in the shadow of the rock was a figure, tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its form indistinct, as if made of heat, haze, and shadow. It had no discernible features, no face, no eyes. But I could feel its attention on me, a cold, ancient, and utterly indifferent gaze. It didn't move. It just stood there, a silhouette of stillness against the rock. And from it, the silence emanated in palpable waves, a crushing, overwhelming force. I knew with a certainty that transcended all logic that I was looking at one of them, a silent god, and it had come to claim my voice. Seeing it broke something inside me. The last vestiges of my scientific mind shattered. There is no explanation for a being made of silence and shadow. There is no protocol for this. I couldn't run this time. My limbs were heavy, uncooperative. The very air seemed to resist my movement. The figure the god didn't pursue. It didn't have to. His presence was enough. The silence it projected was a net, and I was caught in it. I stumbled forward, instinct my only guide. My vision tunneled. The gray was closing in, the world dissolving into a monochrome soup. The only reality was the crushing pressure in my head and the terrifying silence. Now a roaring void in my ears. My thoughts were gone. No internal voice. No narrator in my own head. Just primal, wordless fear. The most terrifying experience of my life. To be utterly alone inside your own mind, your consciousness stripped of language. I was losing myself. I was being unwritten. I don't know how I kept moving. Pure animal instinct. A body functioning after the mind has checked out. I was on a trail I didn't remember finding, leading upwards, out of the canyon floor. With every foot of elevation, the pressure lessened, just a fraction. A slight easing of the suffocating weight. A tiny flicker of a thought, A single word up managed to form in the void. That became my mantra, my sole focus. I climbed, clawing my way up the rocky incline, hands raw, lungs burning. The silence fought me, a tangible gravity pulling me back down into the canyon, towards the silent, watching figure. I reached a ridge, the canyon falling away below. The pressure receded another degree. I could breathe a little easier. The gray at the edges of my vision pulled back, color bleeding back into the world. A new thought formed: phone. I fumbled in my pack, my fingers like clumsy sausages, and pulled out the satellite phone. My hands shook too violently to dial. I just gripped it, a talisman of a world I no longer felt part of. I looked back down into the canyon. The figure was gone, but the silence remained, a pool of stillness, a visible stain on the landscape. I could see my camp, a tiny speck, and the monolith of the listening stone, pulsing with a dark energy. I had to get higher. The next few hours were a blur of pain and effort. I followed the ridgeline always upwards. With every 100 feet of altitude, a piece of myself returned. The internal monologue stitched itself back together, first in broken phrases, then full sentences. The roaring void in my ears subsided, replaced by the sound of the wind, a sound I had never been so grateful to hear. I was escaping. I was literally climbing out of its domain. I finally collapsed on a high plateau as the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery colors that I could now, thankfully, fully appreciate. The pressure was gone. The silence was just normal silence, the gentle quiet of the high desert. I lay on the ground, weeping with relief. I was alive. I was myself again. I checked the satellite phone. A weak signal, but it was there. I couldn't call for a rescue. What would I say? Hello? 911? I was attacked by a silent, shadow-like entity from Native American folklore. They'd send a team, and I'd be putting them in unimaginable danger. I couldn't risk anyone else. But I had to leave a record, get this story out. The world had to know what was in those canyons. My podcast, The Wilderness Protocol. The irony was almost too much to bear. I sat up, back against a rock, and powered on this personal field recorder, the one I'm speaking into right now, and I began to talk, to tell the story. My voice was hoarse, weak, a pale imitation of what it once was. But it was there. It was mine. The god had tried to take it but had failed. As I speak, I'm looking at my hands. There's a faint, red dust ingrained in the lines of my skin. A souvenir from the listening stone I know I'll never fully wash away. And there's something else. On the back of my left hand, a place I don't remember injuring, is a mark. A thin, red line. A scratch. It's a spiral. A small, faint, perfectly formed spiral. I don't know what it means. A brand? A warning? A connection? A part of the silence that has followed me out of the canyon? I don't have the answers. I may never have them. I came here seeking to debunk a legend, to find a simple truth. I found a truth, but it wasn't simple. It was ancient, vast, and terrifying. My investigation is over, but I have a feeling my ordeal is just beginning. I have to get this recording out, warn people. Stay away from the canyons of the unforgiving. Stay away from places where the silence is too deep. Some things are not meant to be understood. Some protocols are not meant to be broken. And some gods are silent for a reason, because their true voice is the void. And if you hear it, it will be the last thing you ever hear. I'm going to hike east, away from the canyon. I'm low on water and exhausted, but I'll make it. I have to. This story needs to be told. I'll upload this audio file as soon as I get a stable enough signal. It might be the last episode of the Wilderness Protocol. Or maybe it's the beginning of a new, much more cautious chapter. Thank you for listening. Your attention, your willingness to hear this story, feels like a small act of defiance against the silence that tried to claim it. It means more than you can possibly know. If you're out there in the wild places, be safe, be respectful, and listen to the silence. But if it starts to listen back, run. This is Elias Thorne for the Wilderness Protocol, signing off for now.